Hey, so in this video, we're going to show you how to design an entire speech from scratch in just a few easy steps. And in fact, if you understand the concepts that I'm going to share with you, it'll make the ability to design a presentation much faster and actually reduce the stress pretty dramatically as well. So stay tuned. Hey, so this is Doug Stannard with Fearless Presentations, the fastest, easiest way to eliminate public speaking fear. And on this episode, on this video, we're going to show you how to design an entire speech from scratch. And basically there's three different stages or three different steps that we're going to go through. And we're going to basically break it down into two separate videos. So the first two steps I'm going to explain in this video, and then I'm going to give you what we call the impact ideas, which is basically taking the concepts that we developed in this video and really taking it to a whole new level. We're going to do that in a separate video. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind though before we actually get started is that if you understand the concepts that I'm going to cover in this video, you can make designing your presentations really, really easy. And in fact, if you go to fearlesspresentations.com and just type on the search bar, just type in speech creator. In fact, we'll put a link to it on the show notes down at the bottom. You can actually go right to that web page, answer a few simple questions, and it'll actually create your speech for you in just a few minutes. So very, very simple process. The thing that you want to keep in mind about this process though is that you have to go through every single step. If you try to skip steps, it makes the whole process a whole lot more difficult. So go step by step through the process, really, really easy. Step one, and this is really the most critical thing when you're designing your presentation, is you've got to narrow down your topic. Now there are thousands of different videos on YouTube about how to narrow down your topic. And just so you don't have to go through all those 1,000 videos like I did, just to kind of check and see what was out there, I can give you a summary of pretty much what all of them are going to tell you, or most of them anyway. If you start with the who, what, when, where that you get in journalism or how to write an article, you can actually narrow down your topic pretty dramatically. So I'll give you an example. Like for instance, let's say I'm going to be giving a presentation for my company about our financials, maybe our quarterly financials. And if I start with the who, obviously that's the company, and if I start with the where, now I can kind of think of, now, am I going to be giving financials for the entire company, or am I going to break this down into regions? And if I go and if I look at my numbers over the last quarter, I can see that one of the regions, the Midwest region, did really, really well. So if I focus more on what they did that was different from the other regions, now I've narrowed down my topic a little bit. So basically, if you just kind of go through all those questions, who, what, when, where. So when obviously is the last quarter. The big thing though, the last question is the why, or the what happened. What is it that this region did? What is it that the Midwest region did that was different from the other regions? And if I go and do a little bit of research and look at their numbers, I might find that they hired a new sales manager. And that new sales manager made a big focus during the last quarter to try to get repeat business from current customers. And so now I can kind of start drawing conclusions based on those numbers. So once I start asking myself those questions, it makes it a whole lot easier now for me to narrow down the topic or the focus of my presentation. So now instead of talking about the entire company's quarterly financials from last quarter, now I can kind of narrow it down to, hey, what did the Midwest region do different that caused them to increase the revenue dramatically? And that was focusing on repeat business. So now I've got a more focused kind of topic, an easier one to kind of go through. So step two is, now that I have a more focused topic, I want to go through and find out what are the major concepts. You know, a lot of people will call these bullet points. So what are the major concepts that the audience needs to know about whatever it is I'm going to tell them? So if I'm still on this topic about the Midwest region, what was the step-by-step process they went through, or what were the things that they did that was different? And I'm just going to make a list of all of the things that I can think of that fit that criteria. And I might come up with 5 things, 6 things, 7 things, 8 things, 10 things, 15 things, 20 things, 30 things, doesn't really matter. I'm just going to make a list of as many items as I can come up with related to this topic. But once I have the list, I'm not going to stop there, because most of the time what folks will do is they're going to cram too much content into their presentation. So instead of jamming 20 bullet points or 30 bullet points or 40 bullet points into the presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sorting those bullet points or those concepts by which ones are most important. So I'm going to start with the most important items at the top, and kind of work my way down to the least most important. So basically all I do when I'm doing this myself, I just have pen and paper. It makes it a whole lot easier. I'm writing all the concepts down, and then for each one of those concepts, I've got 20 concepts here. If I had to rate those on a scale of 1 to 20, which one is the most important? I'll put a number 1 next to the most important thing. Which one's the second most important? I'll put a number 2 next to that one. Third most important, put a number 3. And I'll keep going down through the list. Now, the reason why you want to do this is because it is a whole lot easier to design a presentation focused on just a few key concepts that you cover really well than to try to cover a bunch of stuff in a cursory fashion. So if I'm only going to cover a few concepts in my entire presentation, I'm probably going to want to focus on the things that are most important. So I'll start with number 1, then go down to number 2, and then number 3. And it really depends on the time allotment that you have for your presentation. So if you've got fewer than 20 minutes, you might stop at the top 3. If I've got 45 minutes to an hour to speak, I might go to 4 or 5. But you want to limit the concept that you cover to about 5 at the max. You don't want to cover any more than 5 bullet points. The reason why is because they're not going to remember it anyway. And a lot of times, if you add a 6th or a 7th or 8th bullet point, it makes it more difficult for you to deliver the presentation, to retain the concepts in your own head. And in addition to that, it's going to make it much harder for your audience to come to the conclusion that you want them to come to. So start with the key, most important things. So once you have that outline designed, just here's a little pro tip that can help a lot. If you go back to the bullet points that you've created, and for each one of them, you do what we did with the topic, and you try to say, why do people need to know this particular concept? And kind of think of it from that perspective, it'll make your bullet points much more interesting. So like for instance, if my bullet point number 1 was that we focused a lot on repeat business in the Midwest region. So why? Why would we do that? Well, because if we go back to people who already know us, we're in rapport with them, they trust us, they've already had a success with us in the past. So it's a whole lot easier to sell a satisfied customer from the past than it is to go out and find a new customer and spend a lot of money doing that. So if I have that concept in mind, I can now add that into the bullet point, shrink the bullet point down a little bit, and come up with a bullet point that's much more interesting for the audience. So for each one of those 3, 4, 5 bullet points that you come up with, go back and make them a little bit more interesting. So those are the first 2 steps. The third stage that we're going to cover on the next video is how to take that outline and turn it into a presentation. So once you have the outline, 90% of what you're going to be covering in your presentation is already there. It's already down on paper, it's already set. So we're going to add some what I call impact ideas, things to make your presentation have a little bit more meat and be a little bit more interesting for your audience. So stay tuned for the next video.